What's your take on getting connected to your authentic expression and tools that we can use to find that again?
How long have we got?
You can take it as far
Yeah.
as you want to go.
So I really think there's different like layers to this. And the one, like, just to go like straight in with the deep stuff, because I know how we both roll.
Yeah, right.
But
Let's
like, I
get in
think,
there.
yeah, I honestly believe that a lot of this, and I know this for me as well, is that a lot of it is really the sense of like unlearning the part, like the stories that told you to
Yeah.
stop doing it in the first place. And
Mm.
a lot of the work is actually like de-shaming the part of you that just wants to play and be silly and be cringe and let those pieces out. And it is really this like stripping back of layers and this experimentation. And I know that for me, like I was very creative as a child, but so are most children. That's like, I'm not special. Like
Okay.
most
Yeah.
children are so creative naturally and learn by playing. Like animals learn by playing. You watch like lion cubs, they're wrestling with each other. They're learning to hunt by playing. Like we learn by through play. And then at some point there was a story, and I definitely internalized the belief that the only way to be successful was like science, maths. Like I saw like the STEM subjects, and I also love that part of me, but I let the other parts of me go to
Mm.
focus on like academic achievements, even though my best subjects were actually art and English literature. I was
Mm.
always reading, always drawing, always writing. And then somewhere I learnt, either explicitly or implicitly, that that wasn't good enough. And that
Mm.
wasn't what was going to make me successful. And successful, yeah, looked a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why even with these books that I'm reading now, it's like now I've given myself that opportunity to I mean, they're slightly different books because the ones I'm reading are not definitely not age appropriate. For the ones, there's a bit more spice in these ones.
Yeah, we love a little
Yeah.
spicy.
But yeah, it just, for me, it's like, it's that unlearning. There's like different layers of it,
Yeah.
but that is the bit that I'm just enjoying falling back in love with the process.
Yeah. Well, and I definitely resonate so hard on what you speak about because I identify with that also. I know a lot of people that are listening identify with that high achiever and what we used to get validation for doing well in school. I was the same way. I was more like sewing projects and like making clothes, and then that was like my expression when I was younger. And then I was, oh, but I'm really good at math and science. And like, that seems like more of the logical route. And so it's like,
Mhm.
you're rewarded for different things. Like I agree. It's either that conscious or unconscious. You're like, oh, okay, if I do really well in these areas, then this is actually really good. So I'll do more of that and less of this. So I think that's really important to focus on that de-shaming, as you said, because it's just like, there's just as much value in our art, if not more, because it's like how we're able to connect to like our creative flow, which is our vitality, I think, where it comes from. How would you direct somebody to go about de-shaming and deconditioning themselves?
So I think the first thing would be to look at what you used to do and what you used to love, and then start to ask yourself why you don't do that anymore, just to look for the clues.
Mm.
So that could be, was there a certain person who even, it could even be a throwaway comment that you remember.
Mm.
Like, it doesn't have to be anything malicious, but it could have
Yeah.
been, someone laughing at a project that you were really proud of. Like, you spent ages painting something and you wanted to show someone and they laughed at it. And that's not, that isn't like a big T trauma at all. But
Mm.
that affected you on a personal level and started to show you that, okay, maybe it's not safe to show these things because I might be rejected, I might be laughed at, I might be ridiculed. So start to look at like those parts and those memories and see where you feel that like in your body. Like when you think about creating something and putting it out into the world, like what is the worst thing that you think someone could say? Like,
Mm.
because that's going to be the clue of like being like, well, why does that affect me so much? Why does someone telling me that I'm cringe, or
Mm.
someone's like, for me, I've had a big wound of like, I mean, there's a few there's a few layers of it, but one that I can think of a lot is this idea of like, I'm definitely a recovering perfectionist.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, like, even the smallest criticism would immediately invalidate any other progress, like any other achievement in my head. All I would do was focus on that one negative thing. So 99% could be good, and that 1% would be the only bit that I would hyper focus on.
Yeah.
When I look deeper at that, I'm like, well, what is it about not being perfect that makes me feel so unsafe and so constricted and contracted and like coming back into my shell? And a lot of what it came down for me was actually a form of control. Like it was trying to control everything around me, because if I could control things, then I would be safe. If I can control things, I would feel like, I was good enough. And it's starting to look at those little clues. You can use your triggers as these like breadcrumbs, like leading you to the underlying beliefs. And it takes time. It takes a lot of curiosity and compassionate inquiry, because it cannot be like, you cannot just put more shame onto this. Like you cannot use this as a, like I often say that sometimes people get into the personal development space and they start using it as more evidence as to like why they're not good enough. They're like, well, now I need to fix this. I need to do this. And that is not the aim. It's just, instead of like, oh, why am I always like this? It's like, I wonder why I'm like this. Like there's a different tone to it.
Yeah.
So that's where I would start.
Yeah, that I really like that take, because it kind of feels like you're not picking yourself apart in a way you're like, oh, this is wrong and this is wrong. It's like more of the curiosity of like, okay, so this is the way that we do things, or this is how our brain works, or this is the way we're used to doing things. But it's not that we can't not do things that way, but like maybe there's a good reason why or whatnot. That reminds me of like the more of, instead of like self-improvement, is more feels like the self-acceptance kind of. And I think that I fell into, it's not a trap. I think it's a process. Like when you have your spiritual awakening or you're into this self-development, and I think it gets you so far and it got me so far to an extent where it's like, okay, this is really helpful. And I'm like, oh my God, this is blowing my mind. Like I had no idea. You're becoming self-aware. And then you reach a certain point and you reach a wall and you're like, okay, now it's not helpful. And now like I'm using it as like ammo against myself. And I definitely have been there. And you're like, okay, let's like take a step aside and step back a little bit and zoom out and see if there's like another way to look at things, which I think a lot of people that are on this kind of path that kind of go and naturally kind of fall on. And then once you're like, okay, that's not it. Now what do I do? Now where do I go? So yeah, that's all really helpful to look at, like, okay, what's the worst case scenario? What's the worst case possible situation? And then it's like, I think even reflecting on that, if you could do that and you're like, all right, it's actually not, I wouldn't die, like it would be uncomfortable. So then you're telling your system like, okay, we'd be okay with that. So I think that's important and a really good tip to look at, like, what's the worst thing that can happen that you're worried about, and actually let yourself go there, because we try to avoid it and then it gets worse. I am so excited to announce to you that CPR Your Soul Mystery School is now open for enrollment. I could cry. Actually, I did fucking cry once I hit publish. This is a complete roadmap to come back to life after feeling dead inside. CPR Your Soul was built for creators, entrepreneurs, artists, and mystics who are ready for a life pivot into divine clarity and rock solid foundations to live your soul code. It is packed with 53 lessons of knowledge and directly applicable tools, teachings, meditations, energy work, light language, and exercises to perform CPR on your soul. There's even a VIP option where you get to go through the course with me at your side for 6 weeks. To celebrate the kickoff, use the code REVIVAL for $100 off until March 31st. I can't wait to see you inside.
I think some people call it, I didn't make up this term, but they call it like constructive pessimism, in a way of like, you're just actually exploring what the worst thing that could happen is. And like, exactly like you say, just be like, well, what would I do in that situation? And keeping it really like constructive. That's the whole point. Like not letting yourself go into that like shame spiral of just, you're really circling the drain, like going through all like over and over again, ruminating, but just to be like, well, what would we do? Like, would we be okay? And most of the time, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
And like you say, creating that self-trust, creating that process of like, okay, well, if that did happen, which is still most of the time a very unlikely
Yeah.
possibility, because then you of course have the balance of, well, what if it did work out? Like what if it did? Like what if actually it turned out better than I even imagined? And allowing yourself to experience that.
Mm.
But especially for like highly sensitive high achievers,
Mm-hmm.
like trying to bypass like what the worst thing could happen is, like trying to like gaslight yourself with toxic positivity is not
Mm.
usually the answer, because your brain's working so fast, you're already self-aware. Like you most likely, if you resonate with the term highly sensitive high achiever, you probably do have a tendency towards anxiety, like, and a tendency towards overthinking. So you've got to honor that part of you and actually support it, not just pretend it doesn't exist and demonize it.
Just with that term, I would love to hear about like your experience, how you moved through the world, on how you identify with that and what your process was to get to the place where you're now helping highly sensitive achievers that you work with. Like, what was your path to kind of get there? I'd like to share just a little bit of your background with the audience.
Yeah, for sure. Oh yeah, I haven't even really what I
Yeah,
haven't got
we
into
kind of
anything. Yeah, so I'll rewind a little bit to give some context. So my background is as a veterinarian. So I still currently work a couple of days a week in clinical work, because it is absolutely part of my passion and purpose.
Yeah.
But when I was younger, like my single point of focus was to become a vet. And when I reflect back on it, I did not have this awareness at the time. But when I reflect back on it, part of the appeal was that I was told that it's like the hardest thing to do and the hardest thing to get into. And I believe there was a part of me that's like, well, if I achieve this, then that is going to feel enough. Like that is going to feel enough. Because I always, like, I was just one of those kids who was very sensitive. And I grew up in the UK, and, you know, there's quite a stiff upper lip culture of like, we just get on with it. And I was very sensitive. I was very attuned to horses, loved to spend hours painting. Was very shy, like painfully shy. I used to faint all the time, which I now know is, yeah, I'm hypermobile and like have like mild POTS. So like when I stand up too fast and I faint, and, you know, but that was also, not only is that, you know, a sign of like, I won't go into the science of it, but like it was extremely dysregulating as well, because if I'd get anxious or overwhelmed, I would just faint. So it was very stressful and hard as a child. So I became like focused on like my achievements and realized that I was naturally gifted with some things. And so, yeah, focused on vet school. That was my like single point of focus. Nothing else mattered. Of course, there's more to it, but what it really accumulated in, sort of, it all came to a head in like after I moved over to Australia. I was working for a few years, but there'd always been this part of me that's like, I'm not happy. Like whatever I do, that carrot is just dangling in front of me, and that it's just moving and moving and moving. The goalposts are moving. I'll be happy when I graduate. I'll be happy when I find a good job. I'll be happy when we do this. My big wake up call was actually getting kicked in the face by a horse.
Oof.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's a very real risk as a horse vet, for sure. Like it's a very real risk. And it was a minor kick, as minor as a kick in the face can be. But this was in 2020, and I'd already been on the, you know, like the spiritual path, like doing yoga, and like was a trail runner, spent a lot of time, you know, finding myself out in nature. Classic overachiever, you know, running ultra, going from five, yeah.
Yep. Was a marathoner. I also ran an ultra marathon, and
Yeah.
after that I like crapped myself out so hard, because it was just like, oh, I'll keep going, and I can keep going, and I can keep going really well. So yeah, I feel you on that.
We have so many
I
parallels. I
know.
love it.
And
Yeah.
I saw you post about like finding your love and running again. And I swear to God, I was like, just a few months ago, I was like, man, I really feel like I could like get back into this in a not different like energy than what I was, you know, and I had to put it down and take a break, because I was like, this is too much. Like my hormones were out of whack. I wasn't eating enough. I was rail thin. I had cystic acne. This is all, so much stuff was going on, but it was like, yeah. So I saw you like coming back into running and trailing, and I was like, oh my gosh, I was thinking about that too. So it was, yeah, it's a lot of parallels, which is just so cool. But yeah, keep going.
Yeah. No, just to continue that tangent for just a second, because yeah, I got a stress fracture from running in 2019, so just before the kick in the face. I believe that was my like nudge from the universe to be like,
okay,
guys, you're doing too much, doing too much,
yeah.
like it's too much.
Wow.
And I kind of listened to it. Like I got really into yoga. I left my 8.5 year relationship. So like I listened in
Mm.
that respect, he's a beautiful man. We just had grown apart.
Right.
So I made like a few changes. And
Yeah.
then I believe that, yeah, the universe was then just like, okay, she's actually not listening. Like we tried to make this obvious, but like, she's actually, it's like, is she okay? I don't think she's fully taking the hint that there's a few
Uh-huh.
changes that need to be made. And so I got kicked in the face by a horse, and it was a pretty scary experience, obviously, like physically, but also just the way that it happened. Like I kind of got like backed into a corner. So I genuinely felt terrified for my life.
Wow.
Like even though my physical, like obviously I think I like subluxated my jaw, and there was like, I've got a bit of a scar here,
Yeah.
and I had like a minor surgery, but it was very minor considering what it could easily be. But there was a moment where I was like, this is actually going to be it. Like I can't move. Like I felt very like helpless, and just like this, as they say, like things flashing before you.
Yeah.
And I was in quite like the workplace that I was in wasn't necessarily the most supportive.
Mm.
And I felt a lot of pressure. And that was partly on me, but also partly the culture that they had created of like to get back really quickly.
Yeah.
And I did not take enough time off. Like I'd love to say it was a kick in the face and a moment of clarity, and it was like, cool, we're here, done.
Yeah.
But I did not take, took like 2 sick days and went back with stitches in my face. But then what did happen is I really got these, like when I got my stitches out, I took that opportunity to go to a yoga class, a yin class, because I never usually would have had that time off, never usually would have gone to that class. And I had this like full body experience, like this download of like yoga teacher training is the next step. Like this is your sign, like full-time vet work is not where you're like going. And for me, that was this like, okay, that sounds a bit scary. Like I've done a lot of work for this, and I did my yoga teacher training. It all snowballed organically. Like I got these opportunities to go deeper, like one-on-one with people. I realized that coaching was something that I was hugely passionate about. And I also realized that so many people in my industry and in healthcare are actually extremely sensitive, in the sense that like deeply attuned to, like highly empathetic, amazing attention to detail, spots patterns that other people don't, and has like also this like genuine desire to do good. There really is this like, you cannot sit, like you can't stand aside when there's like injustices going on, and I was like, but then we have this high achiever archetype as well of like, we always want to do more. And I was like, there must be a way that we can bring these things together so it actually supports your nervous system and allows you to like amplify your message and feel like still give, but without giving all of yourself, like without burning out. Like there's, as you would see in the healthcare industry, there's just, so much. Like my mum's been a nurse for 40 years, and in the NHS in the UK, that's like on its knees, that system. And yeah, for me, the term highly sensitive high achiever just like came to me in the last few years to really like just, give the feedback I've got is that it feels like very validating. Like people are just like, that actually sums up my experience. Because the term, I've gone off on a few tangents, but the term highly sensitive is also, there's some controversy around it from like highly sensitive person or HSP. There's a lot, people have got some strong opinions on it and I will just address it here because I don't use the term HSP that much unless someone uses it with me, because the person who wrote about that, Dr. Eve Aron, she's had some controversy because a lot of what she describes does match with like an autism diagnosis. And there was a conversation about, and I'd be really keen to hear your thoughts on this as well, like about how it was making it like more palatable, like making autism more palatable by calling it this. But the way I see it is that many people who are autistic do resonate with being sensitive. So do many people with ADHD, other neurodivergent diagnoses, but they like, it's not something that's just like, for me, it's a trait. It's not a diagnosis. It's like you can be sensitive and not resonate with a neurodivergent label or diagnosis. Likewise, you can be neurodivergent and not resonate with being sensitive. So for me, it's just like, it's a trait within things. Most of my clients are neurodivergent for sure. But I always just think if a label like empowers you and it validates your experience and it feels empowering, and for me, self-diagnosis is valid. Whatever feels good for you and suits you. If you don't want
Yeah.
to use a label, don't use it. Like, that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, based on resonance. Yeah, and I didn't even when I had first like heard that in Who You Help, like I took it as like more of a like because I used to not resonate with highly sensitive, or I lived my life very much in the beginning, like just in the last couple of years I had made a shift, but I was very stoic. I was very like nothing bothers me. I feel no emotion. I can handle everything. Live from that space. So the last 4 or 5 years, I have started to like more and more as I've become more attuned to my body and my emotions and feeling all those things, I do resonate with feeling highly sensitive. And now I think like that can change as you move throughout the world and as you start to take some layers and masks off and do your inner work and things. So I think identifying for me as a highly sensitive person also like I feel seen in a way of psychically and in environments and in big groups around certain people. Like I'm way more sensitive now than I ever have been in my life, and I can notice those nuances where I'm at depending on who I'm around and how I feel afterwards. And I'm like, man, this is a lot more work being highly sensitive. Like you take longer time to adjust and sometimes like reacclimate or like turn your batteries back on if you've expended a lot. So I definitely resonate with that term, and I think that it probably lands for a lot of people because I think collectively we're just more aware and awakening to like, oh yeah, we can feel, we can do these things, like we can feel, it is safe to feel our emotions in our bodies. And I saw one of your reels that you had posted where it's just like when someone's not used to like feeling any emotion in their body and they're like, where do you feel this in your body? And I remember feeling that 10 years ago when I was in just a random yoga class being like, yeah, I guess I'll try this. And I'm just like, what do you feel in my body? And so it's so interesting how I think that like we can, like if you don't identify with highly sensitive and you start going on this path, most likely you probably will at some point. You might not even realize EMF is affecting your body right now, especially from the device you use every day, your phone. It wasn't until my conversation with Tim Sanders, the owner of Omnia, that I understood that we can work with technology instead of always trying to fight it. Omnia offers a revolutionary product, a unique energy imprint placed on a sticker that you put on your devices. This imprint changes the vibration of EMF, bringing it into harmonic resonance with your body. Here's the best part. Omnia's products balance the electrical and magnetic components of EMF, and they've done tests on the heart, blood, body strength, and water to show their products bring huge benefits to the body. Plus, the energy imprint in the sticker lasts forever. No need to replace them. Customers report getting better sleep, better focus, fewer headaches, less fuzziness in the body, and less stress. Head to OmniaRadiationBalancer.com and use the code STORMY for 10% off. To learn more from Tim, listen to episode 64 on the podcast. You'll learn how understanding EMF can totally transform your health, help you maintain balance in our tech-driven world, and even unlock collective awakening. Check out the show notes for the link and start harmonizing today.
Yes, I think your journey, as you describe, is so common of actually, like, especially that high achiever archetype. There's this, pushing through. And even like using the like ultra marathoning example as well, like it was a funny one for me because, and I don't know if you resonate with this as well, but like I felt like I learned so much about myself, especially in terms of like resilience and discipline. And also trail running in particular is, there's like, it's such a beautiful, just connecting to nature, connecting with amazing community. Like it had so many positives for me. But then when I got my stress fracture, I actually felt very disconnected from my body because the symptoms of a stress fracture can sort of wax and wane. And I didn't always feel pain when I was running, and then I'd feel it later. And I felt like my body had like betrayed me in some way. It took a lot to actually trust my body. And especially being someone with hypermobility syndrome, which is also very common amongst neurodivergent people, like more common. And one of the things with that is reduced proprioception. So like not really knowing where I am in space. Like I'm always banging into things, like I'm always covered in bruises. Like and you have like a lack of stability in your joints as well. So combine that with the fainting. I was like, well, no wonder I didn't like fully trust my body.
Yeah.
Like it took a long time to actually be like, okay, I'm safe, like in this vessel. And
Yeah.
now I know how to use it. Like I'm so mindful with my workouts, with yoga. Like I did a marathon last year and I called it like my mindful marathon training. And
Like,
yeah. And again, I was like, it was probably trial and error with it. Like some days, there's always times on a long run where you're like, what am I doing? And this, yeah, it has been this like process of realizing that I was sensitive, but I
yeah.
was sensitive in the way that like raw exposed skin is sensitive, not and trauma can absolutely do that to you as well. Like trauma will make someone more sensitive,
Mm.
but there's a difference between like regulated sensitivity where you're actually noticing all these subtle shifts, you're noticing the energy, you might be connecting to your psychic gifts,
Mm.
all of those things. There's a difference between that regulated sensitivity, giving yourself space to feel it and notice it all, but you don't always have to react. Like sensitivity is not reactivity and it's not fragility. Like I feel
Mm.
so strongly about this.
I'm so glad you're taking it
Yeah.
there. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, because to be sensitive like does not mean that you're like going to crumble at any moment. Like absolutely, especially with those with a trauma history,
Mhm.
there may be moments like that, and there will be challenges. I'm not going to deny that, but being sensitive does not mean that you are not capable and that you're not resilient. In fact, I strongly believe that sensitivity is a strength, and actually, sensitive people are far more capable of being resilient because one of the things about resilience is your ability to reflect and learn from so called mistakes or shortcomings or hardships. So, when you use that sensitivity with a regulated nervous system, you can reflect
Mm.
on situations and then grow from them and
Mm.
get stronger. Like that is the whole concept of anti-fragility. It's that not only do you have resilience, which means you bounce back to that place, but you actually come back stronger. You actually
Mm.
are able to come back with more insight. And that is where, the best thought leaders and spiritual teachers, like that's what they teach from. They teach from that like embodied place of I have learned through this
Mhm.
experience and I have regulated, I have embodied this knowledge. And if you think about the opposite of sensitivity, it's like, depending on what context, but it's like unfeeling, it's like numb, it's like dissociated. Like that's,
Right.
yeah,
Like
I'm not so
not a healthy state to be in.
exactly. As
Right.
like, yeah, you're just not noticing. You're just,
Yeah.
I think of like, that movie, like Don't Look Up, where it's like, I'm just going to pretend it's not there. Like
Yeah.
that's, that is not what we need more of. Like I
Yeah.
firmly believe we need more highly sensitive people in positions of power and
Yes.
leadership who are noticing what is going on and not just, yeah, pretend. Yeah, I mean, this can go, go so many ways,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
it's sensitivity is not fragility.
Right. Right. No, I would love to take that there, but yeah, I think that that was a very strong belief, I guess. Yeah, a very strong story belief that I had to relearn for myself because I thought that was not I thought that was weakness when I was growing up. So the way that I saw things was like, oh, I saw unregulated emotion and a very chaotic version of things where I was just like, okay, so clearly feeling your feelings or expressing things is not safe. So you should just shove everything down and just keep your head above the water and everything will be okay until you keep doing that. And then at some point you're going to explode. It's just like what happens when you can only keep it together until you can't. So it's like if we're learning from a different angle and from like a different lens where you're like, oh, okay, no, this is actual strength for you to have these lessons, to feel these things. And then, like you said, be embodied when you're moving forward, because then it's like how we get to learn from our lessons instead of just things are just like happening to us. And then we're repeating cycles or patterns because we're not taking a moment to be sensitive of how we felt and what we've learned and reflecting back and then moving forward. So I think just all what you had said with people being able to be in leadership and show and be in a space where we can look to people where they are in positions of power, where highly sensitive people could be like, yeah, I can do this and lead because I have all of these skills, so I'd love for you to talk about more about what that you think that would offer the world, and how we can, who people identify as these, like how can we kind of allow ourselves to be that and be in leadership.
Yeah, well, I think it's basic empathy, isn't it, as well?
Right.
And it's like that canary in the coal mine situation. It's like that canary is there to alert people when something is wrong. And you wouldn't say, oh, that canary is too sensitive.
Right.
You wouldn't want a less sensitive
So
canary.
true.
You're just like, I wish that smoke detector didn't go off. And of course, they're using, let's just flog this analogy, but you can have a smoke detector that is overly like hypersensitive in the sense that they might be wound up by like trauma, and they think that, the toast burning is the house burning down. Like that is like unregulated sensitivity. Like that is where the work is really on regulating your nervous system and expanding your capacity for more range. But the answer is not to like turn off those feelings like that. And there's just so much nuance in this conversation, because to be a leader and to be a manager and someone who is respected, like your people need to be seen and heard. And you can only see and hear them if you're actually willing to be open and willing to listen and willing to also notice the patterns and give yourself and your community permission to change and learn from things. Like if you see something happening, it's not just, okay, well, we just keep pushing through. We just keep pushing through and we do it the old way and we do this. It's an openness. It is still a strength. And just a little bit of a tangent as well, but this, like what I was thinking of is like with healthcare and veterinary, like sometimes you do need to compartmentalize. There's moments where you need to be like, okay, well, I am the person in this situation who does need to stay like relatively stoic, does need to stay relatively calm. But that doesn't mean that you're just turning off your senses. In fact, you're doing the opposite. You're like, okay, I'm fully present in this. I'm focusing on like everything that is happening right now. And yes, I might be feeling a lot. And maybe this isn't the space to fully express it, but you do need to give yourself another opportunity to express it, which brings in the creativity component as well. That's why I think it's like, I'm so passionate about encouraging people to have like a creative outlet. If you have, well, anyone really, but especially if you have that role where there are times where you do need to compartmentalize and do things, like have a way that you can express that so it's not stored in your body, it's not just staying there. So it's funny. It's like funny, the people who say like you're too sensitive or you're too emotional, like those are so often the people who like lose their shit at like the smallest thing. Like it's
right.
They're like, well, anger doesn't seem to count as an emotion for these people. They're just
right.
like, yeah, exactly.
You're so true. And I just to speak a little bit about that, because like I think that as I allowed myself to be more sensitive or be attuned to that, I think it made me a better nurse. Like you're tuning to the subtleties of like how you feel the situation, you're reading the room, like all those things. I think that when you're speaking about, how sensitivity can be a superpower, that in a lot of jobs that we work in, or even in like relationships, like being sensitive to another with empathy and being able to navigate those things allows you to like operate at a different consciousness. Really, you're tuned to what more is happening like underneath the surface of things. It is really helpful in so many industries, especially in both of our backgrounds, to be able to really notice those subtleties, because that's where like you really start to pick up on things that most people, wouldn't. And I think that's a huge superpower to be able to do that. But how would you recommend somebody to be like, okay, we're like talking about regulated nervous system. Like, what's your take and process of working with people to like help them start this process of like having a more regulated nervous system? And do you think that we're supposed to be regulated all the time?
Yeah. So I think there's so many different layers to this again, and there's different stages that people are at.
Yeah.
And so the first thing that I don't think anyone could go on social media anymore. I mean, maybe if your algorithm's totally different. Without
if it's just cats, maybe.
Yeah.
It's just like you're just specifically like all happy things.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I mean,
there's a lot going on.
I've got a lot of cats on my algorithm, to be fair. But there's a lot of like 5 tips to regulate your nervous system,
Yeah,
or
right. It's hyped. Yeah,
balance your hormones, or
right.
like stop the cortisol face, like
Cortisol
all the,
face. Yeah,
yeah.
I was
I'm
just gonna, I was
I'm
like,
like,
oh my
you
God, this is
guys, and
right.
yeah, there's so much stuff out there that is so far from the original source that has like it's watered down and watered down and watered down until
Yeah.
it becomes this very like dogmatic, overly simplified, and almost like performative way to approach regulating your nervous system.
Mm,
And I feel like it's lost like all kind of meaning as to what it is. So like a regulated nervous system or a healthy nervous system is not calm all the time.
yeah.
A healthy nervous system is responsive, again, sensitive, like it sees what's happening and
Mm,
it responds appropriately. And it's able to be flexible and adaptable. So it's able
mm,
to be activated when it needs to be, because if you step out into the road in front of a car, you do not want to be in that like calm state of just like, oh yeah, I'll just like carry on moving. You want to have that activation
yeah.
and come back. But in modern life, what a lot of people are missing is that comeback. Like they're
Yeah.
spending so much time in that activated state.
Right.
So the first step for most people is to learn to down regulate. So
Okay.
come down, like to have tools to bring yourself down into that state. And creativity is a beautiful way to do that too. Um,
Okay.
yeah, the breath is like my favorite for sure because it's so
Hmm.
accessible. And we're talking more about like slow breathing here. So you're probably familiar with the physiological sigh, but whoever's not, that's one that's been very popularized by Andrew Huberman. But it's where you take an inhale through the nose, a second inhale through the nose, and then a slow exhale either through the nose or through the mouth, really
Mm,
lengthening out that exhale.
mm,
And it's something you can do like anywhere, anytime,
mm,
and just practicing this sense of coming back and noticing how it feels, because it's really starting to create safety in your body, create safety
mm,
in your vessel. And that's was so much of my work because I didn't feel safe in my own body. And
mm.
a lot of that, those things, those 5 tips to down regulating, absolutely useful in those earlier stages. But what I feel very strongly about at the moment is there's quite a lot of people who've been doing this work for a while. And the ultimate aim is not to be every time you feel uncomfortable to be like down regulating back into that state.
Mm,
It's also about expanding your capacity to be able to like expand your window of tolerance, which is the place where you feel capable, where you feel you can meet life challenges. Like we don't want to be just making our world smaller and smaller and smaller, avoiding everything that triggers you
mm.
until you feel like safe, but you're wrapped in bubble wrap.
Yeah.
Like the whole point of what, in my opinion, of life is like, I want to squeeze every drop of this human experience. Like I'm so here for exploring. And the only way I can do that is if I expand my nervous system's capacity to handle those things. And
Mm.
that's the next step. And there's quite a few things around on the internet at the moment that's making my eye twitch. Like with the
Oh.
yeah,
Oh,
just with
man.
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No. You go.
Oh,
I was
I
pretty
was
much
just
done.
gonna
Yeah.
say that, like, I think that's so refreshing to hear because, from from what I see on the internet and the algorithm is that is like, this for your nervous system, this for your nervous system, and I think it's so refreshing to hear. No, you're not supposed to be in that state all the time. You're not needing a calm nervous system all the time. That's not to be able to be in that expansive and expand the nervous system and be able to put yourself in uncomfortable positions and feel okay with that and learn the tools to like breathe through that and move through those things. I think are those really important tools, especially for those that are like wanting to do new things, create something, try something new, or like switch their career or put themselves out there, be seen, which you talk to a lot about with helping people do. And I think that is, in order to do that, we have to be able to expand that system to hold those feelings and then learn how to like navigate those things. But it's nice to know that, like, no, we need your nervous system like literally to be reactive in a lot of different ways. I
Mhm.
think actually talking about being seen, I know you work with people to do this. How have you navigated this? And if someone's really struggling with this right now and they're wanting to create something, how would you help someone kind of fight that battle if they're fighting that right now?
In terms of like the
Being
visibility.
seen. Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
being seen. Yeah. So, as someone who is sensitive, it's very likely that you have ideas that are potentially not like what's normally spoken about. And that can feel like most people who are sensitive, who grew up sensitive, feel like some kind of black sheep in a way. Like there's
Mm.
a sense of, being a little bit different, and there can be a lot of vulnerability with that. Not always, but it can feel very vulnerable. And there often we use like fear. There's two camps for how people approach fear. You've got like the let's just kill the fear. They're like David Goggins. They're like no feeling and just push through.
Yeah.
And then there's often like the other end of it where it's almost like, it's okay to be scared. Like it's okay to be overwhelmed. And it's like almost like the two ends of the spectrum.
Right. Right.
And I think it's about like allowing this like to meet in the middle, to
Okay.
allow the fear to be there. This is Elizabeth Gilbert speaks about this a lot.
Oh, she's
And
my
just
favorite.
I'm actually thinking of seeing her tonight. I haven't bought a ticket yet, but
What?
she's in Melbourne, and I'm like, I feel like I had a client cancel this their session this evening, and I'm like, and then I heard her on a podcast, and I was like, oh wait, I wonder if she's here like now, and she is. So I feel
Oh
like
my
that's a sign.
God.
I'm gonna probably
Oh
buy a
my
ticket.
gosh. Yeah, that's your
Yeah,
sign.
yeah,
Like, please go for me.
yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
if I was there, I would absolutely be coming.
Yeah, I think
Just, yeah, the way
yeah.
she talks about creativity and just, yeah, continue. Okay.
And she talks about, the fear is there. Like the fear is
Yeah.
there, and it's like your companion. It's like
Yeah.
we don't need to kill the fear.
Right. Right. Right.
And she said something that I always remember, and she was like, if you were, if you met like a truly fearless person, you'd actually probably think they're a psychopath. Like,
So
they've
true.
yeah. And so your fear is not a sign that you are doing
Yeah.
something wrong.
Yeah.
It's a sign that you care. Like
Uh,
it's okay. It's
yeah.
okay to care what people think. Like that is also
Yeah.
fine. Like
Such a great reframe right there. Yeah.
it's human nature to want to be accepted, and it's not just a like in your head thing. This is like a visceral survival
Hmm.
strategy from when we were having, being in community, being in tribes. If you were exiled from the
Mm.
tribe, you would be at risk of dying. So
Right. Out of the pack. Right.
exactly. So this
Hmm.
fear of rejection is so like deeply ingrained into your nervous system. And we have just like, it's just been warped slightly into, putting my art out there. Like your
Hmm.
nervous system may be perceiving that as like a real threat to your life.
Right.
And
Right.
it showing yourself that it's okay. And
Hmm.
I think doing that, like for a lot of people, it's about like progressive overload. It's about like going to the gym. Like you're not going to just go and
Mm.
pick up, if you haven't gone to the gym for however long, you're not going to go try and deadlift 150 kilos.
Right.
You're going to go and be like, okay, well, if I just show like a little bit more of myself and to people that I trust, or I just go and I train with some smaller dumbbells and
Hmm.
show my body that it's okay, like grow from that experience,
Hmm.
and just start to put yourself out there. Like the barrier to entry for like creativity and entrepreneurship is low at the moment. Like you can
Yeah.
get online and do whatever you want in theory,
Right.
and it's just there's so much available. Like I remember when I started teaching yoga, I had a colleague, again, wasn't malice in this comment at all, but she said, like, just remember you're a vet, not a yoga teacher. And that was a moment of like, there's some people that think this is not okay to be
Oh,
both.
yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah.
this is really interesting. And
Yeah.
I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to just explore what it's like to let these different parts of me out. My life has changed exponentially since allowing myself to do multiple things, and
Yeah.
being like, I find personally I find content creation so much fun. Not everyone does, but it
Yeah.
is my way of like expressing myself creatively now.
Yeah.
And it takes time to be able to be okay with it not being accepted and being misunderstood, and
Mm.
knowing that your authenticity is polarizing. The right people will love it, but there will be the
Mm.
people that it's not meant for who will find it pretty,
Mm.
there will be people out there who will not understand it. And so I don't suggest that someone who is, has a really deep fear of being seen just randomly gets online and just starts going live on Instagram every day,
Mm.
and just goes absolutely wild with it. Just take it slow, show your nervous system that it's safe, and you will be amazed at how it grows. Like if I look at what I do now compared to the girl who used to, who literally used to faint if a teacher asked a question, even though she knew the answer, she would faint. Like, and now I'm quite happy speaking on podcasts. Like I did a keynote, like my first like paid speaking gig this week at a veterinary
Tell us
conference.
about that.
Well, so it was a virtual conference. So it was
Okay.
still, but it was it was through a vet friend that I have we've worked together before in the US. And she approached me, asked me if I wanted to speak at her conference, all about
Wow.
imposter syndrome in the veterinary profession. And it was, people were crying, like they were like, I'm so seen, I'm so
Whoa.
validated.
Yeah.
And that, for me, I just didn't think that was an option. Like, I just would never have thought that sort of thing was an option. Like, I was so shy, like
Wow.
so, so shy. And now I just jump on podcasts like this and
Yeah. Oh
chat.
my gosh. And like it sounds even in that talk, both of your worlds, what I'm feeling right now is like how we're able to integrate so many different parts of ourselves. And this
Mm-hmm.
is when I started doing parts work or shadow work, or where you're like, you're this way at work, you're this way with these friends, you're this way here. And we're kind of used to like compartmentalizing ourselves and each other to like understand like where the boundaries, okay, where can I take this conversation, or where am I going to be like safe in this way, and like how crazy can my topics be and stuff with who or whatever. I think that's so cool that like as you like become more whole in yourself, then you're able to say, okay, I can bring all parts
Mm-hmm.
together. And then now you're able to share like imposter syndrome with your work. So it feels like your work kind of blends together in being able to hold both of those. You're able to hold your whole self in that space. It's super refreshing. We feel like we have to like leave this and then go over here and just cancel that part out. And I worked just the last couple of years with that, even with my own medical background. I was like, oh, I have to leave this all behind. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, no, actually, we learned so much from this, and it can integrate, and it can be in a different, you can reiterate it and be in a different zone, or take it a different way, or if you need to. So I think that's really cool and very exciting. So congratulations for being able to do that talk.
Thank you. It's so, I think it's so important because
Yeah.
I do think sometimes this work feels inaccessible to people who maybe are happy in their career, or like, happy in the sense that they know this is what they want to do, but, they do want to know themselves deeper, and their career might be a more traditional, corporate career, or
Mm-hmm.
you can allow yourself to explore this work in whatever way feels true to you. And like when I started teaching yoga, I originally started teaching whilst I was working full time at from my previous role. And I genuinely believe it made me a better vet because
Mm.
I was so much more regulated in myself. When I was in stressful situations, I was able to really like focus on my body, feel how I was feeling. I was able to bring myself into a regulated state, which naturally affects the people around you. So
Mm.
they become like, they use you to co-regulate. Animals, especially horses, they can feel that so intensely if you are stressed. So
Mm.
having those tools made me a better vet. Even the communication from holding space in a class and holding meditations, like I could notice how my tone of voice was affecting
Mm.
things. There were so many skills. And then like
Yeah.
from my veterinary background, that makes me a better coach in so many ways, because I see people like in their grief making these heartbreaking decisions, and I can
Mm.
hold space for everyone to, those situations. And they don't exist in a vacuum. And
Mm-hmm.
I believe that there's a lot of people who would love to let some of their multi-passionate traits out
Mm.
and see how it can all create this, like, again, squeeze every drop of this life
Yeah.
experience.
Okay, so from there, I want your take on how we can become wealthy and healthy, and expand on that multi-passionate. Like, what's your take on that? What's our advice for this?
Well, it's following the nudges.
Mm.
So not waiting until the kick in the face, ideally. um,
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, I've had my own kick in the face. I know exactly what you
yeah,
mean, but several.
yeah,
So yeah.
yeah.
Okay, listen to the
So
nudges.
I would say listen to the nudges, and listening, like there's a balance between that curious exploration and that following the inspiration. but then also not being attached to the outcome and exactly how you think it's going to be. Because I could never have predicted the way that things are unfolding. And whilst I do believe in having this greater vision and being really connected to your values, I think that is like the most simple and profound thing that a human can do. And it's spoken about all the time, but actually coming down to your values and like what is important to you, and then using that as a framework for every decision that you make. Because when you are multi-passionate, my biggest challenge is actually like it's not like doing too much. Like even today I went for a short run and I was like, maybe another marathon. I was like, no, we're not doing this. It's like, no, we're not doing this right now. And then I'm like, oh, I really want to do this art class. Like I really want to do this. And I'm like, no, I'm launching a course, I'm doing this,
Yeah.
like my parents are coming over for a month. I was like, no.
Yeah. Right. Right.
So
Reel
I
it
was like,
in. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I was like, coming back to my values, and I was like, okay,
Yeah.
biggest value is freedom. It's like, if I overload my schedule, I am literally canceling out my biggest value right now. So
Yeah.
no, this season of life, that's not happening.
Yeah.
So values, I think, will help like having your values, following the nudges, using that as a guide. And it's interesting when you said like wealthy. Yes, I think of, abundance. I think of money. It's not wrong to want money. But it's as soon as you said that, what came to me is like generational wealth. And for me, like the biggest, like the legacy that I want to leave is like the ability to actually regulate your emotions, to feel safe in your body. Like for me, that would be like the biggest generational wealth, is to actually pass that on, to create like a safe place for creative self-expression. And I believe that when you focus on your natural gifts, which the more that you peel back those layers, the more you do the de-shaming, the more you embrace your sensitivity, like that is where your genius is.
Yeah.
The things that you find flow state in, the things that you lose track of time, the ones, the things your friends come to you, like that's there for a reason. Like not everyone has that.
Yeah.
And so whilst that's not a roadmap, that's kind of where I would go.
Yeah, that's brilliant. No, I think that's a wonderful way. And I love that example you gave for the freedom. Freedom is also one of my core values for sure. So I definitely resonate with like overpacking. And then you're like, wait a minute, I'm like sabotaging myself for feeling this, because I also like freedom and flexibility in my days of like having a free day to do, what you want to do. So I think getting kind of that clarity on, okay, what do I value? What are things that I want to focus on in my life or feel in my life, I think is really important. And just, peeling back those layers to realize like, okay, what am I good at? And I think that, it's a path where people, I think it's easy to be like, oh, it's so easy to see it in other people. And then sometimes it's difficult to mirror that back and see it in ourselves. So even having some like, reflective people in your life or coaches you work with to be able to be like, hey, I see this in you. And then you'll be like, oh, I didn't realize that was a thing. I thought everybody could do that. I think that's really great to go from that lens. And that does feel really healthy and wealthy. Do you have anything that you want to like provide that we didn't kind of cover? Is there something else that feels like we left out, or does the conversation feel complete to you?
I reckon it feels pretty complete. The one last thing that I'll add, just as what we were just talking about in terms of following those nudges, is something that a permission slip that I feel like I needed a few years ago, in the sense that like, yes, you can go all in and that's a beautiful way to do it, but like you don't have to. You don't have to. And that's like Elizabeth Gilbert says this as well. Like you don't have to make like put all the pressure on your art and create from that place of scarcity. Like there's space and time and for you to experiment. Some people do want to go down that, burn the boats, we're going all in. And that is absolutely valid option for a lot of people, but it doesn't have to be the only way. Like it does not have to be, I'm going to quit everything and go like a full-time entrepreneur. If that is not like, if that feels unsafe to your nervous system, like different people respond to the pressure in different ways. So just a permission slip that like you can explore something with some flexibility to see how it lands for you. And even if it doesn't work out in the way that you envisioned it, like what you learn from that will be so invaluable in your next chapter. And like, how fun would that be in, 30, 40, 50 years, tell your grandkids, like, I did this and, this is what happened. And this, yeah, just allow yourself to experiment. That'd be the last thing.
Yeah. Oh, I love that because I think that like we could get so inspired by people to be like, oh, I did this and had this much in my bank account and then was able to, we hear the stories that we're doing, that people, start from nothing and catapult or whatever. And it feels very inspiring. But yeah, like coming to nervous system, like, yes, that worked for them. That maybe that was the best case scenario for them, but like it doesn't have to be that way. And it also doesn't, it can feel very triggering to a lot of people to do that. So I think that holds like that, the framework that you're providing is like the multi-passionate, you would have a lot of things, like just because you choose to do these things doesn't mean this is any less or any different. So I think that's like, especially for wanting to create something, it takes time and momentum and consistency to be able to slowly share yourself if you're still feeling kind of that, fear of being seen and stuff. So I think that's such a great lens to provide because it's like, no, it doesn't have to be send it, you could still send it by
Yeah.
still, doing other things. I'll link all of your links where people can contact you and follow you. Do you want to just say your Instagram just so people can kind of, if they're listening, that they can search it?
Yeah, Instagram's the best place to find me, at Finding Flow State.
Perfect. Yeah. And all those links in her website include in the show notes. And yeah, this was just so wonderful. Such a good, I think just very needed conversation with the nervous system and being seen and all these things, as I think a lot of people in the audience will really resonate with. And thank you just so much for sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you so much for holding space and just creating that. Yeah, it's been so beautiful. I love this
Yeah.
conversation. Yeah.
Yay. Good. All right. Thank you guys. If you loved our conversation, you can repost it on Instagram, give us a shout out, leave a comment if you'd like, or give us a thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. And until then, we'll see you in the next episode.